In my world there is music and good vibes and laughter and lovers, adventure and friendship. We know who we are. And I don't think I would be me without you being you. Your direction, expression, intention has taken us far.
Hello and welcome everyone to Beethewellness Podcast, episode number 21.
Hello. Welcome.
How do you say that in Spanish?
21.
21. Yeah.
21.
I was wrong what I was thinking in my head, so I'm glad I didn't just throw it out there. So we are coming to you live from San Francisco, California this morning.
Yes.
And we've been up here working on the disco fish, getting some last minute optimization dial in before it heads to the desert.
Yes.
Which is awesome.
And the disco fish, for those of you who don't know, is our Burning Man art car. So it's how long is it? How
in
long?
feet?
Yeah, in feet. No, in meters.
Multiple. I don't know. I didn't know what you meant. It's long.
Like 40 feet?
Yeah, I think when it's all put together, it's at least 40 feet because the trailers. Well, no, it's way more than that.
Is it?
So the jaw, like the bottom jaw / dance floor, is 8 feet. Mm-hmm. The actual vehicle is 18 feet. Mm-hmm. So what's that? 36. The trailer itself is 20.
No, 18 and 8 is 26.
Okay, 26.
Yeah,
26. The trailer itself is 20, so there's 46, and then the tail is an additional 25 feet.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah, so if you guys want to check it out, you can Google disco fish, and it's a big angler fish that has LED light, like lit scales on the side, and
it's pretty cool.
It's pretty awesome. Has a disco ball out in front that acts like the little light that the anglerfish exhibits off the top of their head, and it's pretty awesome.
It's pretty awesome.
And we got an upgraded sound system this year, so Adam was putting in work, getting it all ready.
Getting dialed, which is cool.
So that leads us to our next topic, which is that we have to talk a little bit about the scheduling and the way that the rest of the year is going to play out. So the way that these challenges are currently run, they're on 4-week cycles. So we have a preparatory week and then 3 weeks of the actual challenge. So if you do the math on that, that would actually equal 13 challenges over the course of the year. And of course, we only do 12 challenges in a year. So if you pay for a yearly subscription, you get 12 challenges, one that correlates with each month. But it gets a little wonky with how the weeks work out. So we have a couple built-in extra prep weeks or off weeks. One to, dial in the 12 challenge 12-month schedule, and also for us each to have a couple of weeks that are extra for break time. So Adam and I have worked in a little time where we can actually take vacation from the year. So not that we don't want to be with you all the time, but when we go to Burning Man, we will be completely off the set and unavailable. So this will be the time when we work in a little extra break time to balance it all out for the year.
Yeah, so the way that's going to look is this month will be the first one of those that we're going to do this coming month. And so there'll be the normal 3 weeks of regular challenge, just like the preparatory week, which we're starting tomorrow, and then the normal 3 weeks of challenge, and then there'll be 2 additional weeks of workouts and daily reminders, like basically all of the check-off stuff that you normally do. So the diet will be there, the sleep will be there, and the workouts will be there, but there won't be the daily articles or the challenges.
Right. Or us
necessarily.
Yes, yeah.
So it's kind of like idling. You guys can carry on and do your thing, and maybe we'll leave somebody in charge. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to find somebody.
So we're going to, an adult to your adult.
Yeah.
So we'll do that this month, and then I think we're going to do it again in December.
Yes.
Right. So there'll be a Christmas break, so to speak, in there.
Exactly.
And then everything will be awesome.
Yeah.
The timing works out perfectly.
Right. So if anyone has any questions about that, let us know. But like we said, we'll leave workouts. We'll leave everything's open. There'll be all the daily reminders. but we just won't be in the program, so to speak. And Adam and I will be unavailable for a minute. So, and actually Ben and Marco will be unavailable too, because they'll be with us.
The whole company is going to Burning Man.
We're going dark, but we will try to maybe talk to maybe getting some folks in there to help monitor and keep things in check. But you guys
are rolling.
Yeah.
I mean,
you guys are pros.
Yeah.
Exactly. So anyhow, we just wanted to clear that up so that everyone could, if you wanted to take vacation as well during that time or come to Burning Man, there's an open invitation for anyone who wants to join us at Burning Man to do so.
Yeah.
So anyhow, let's get moving into some of the questions that we had. Obviously, we asked you folks if you wanted anything covered next month or in the next couple of months as we move through summer. But some of the questions we wanted to go ahead and just address briefly here today. And then we can also go into those things in more depth over the upcoming months. But we thought that these were some good topics that maybe we could just jam on today.
Yeah. And especially this first one, macronutrient timing. This is a hot topic. And I think it seems to me like we talk about it a little bit every time because there's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of different things that go on, and there's so much that you can do to optimize your situation, or not at all. If you're still getting to the point that you're dialing in your food and you're free feed and everything's working, then you just don't even need to sweat this stuff. And in fact, I would encourage you not to sweat this stuff until you actually need to, because it's just an additional level of thinking about diet and health and all of that kind of stuff, which you may or may not really see any benefit from.
Yeah, and one of the ways to know whether it's time for you or not is a couple of things. If you have a performance goal, then obviously it's probably a good time to look at your macronutrient strategy and how you're timing carbs and how you're feeding yourself in order to fuel for that performance. But the other thing to look at, especially for folks who are still in the free feed part of their journey, if you haven't been doing this for like a year, or at least 8 months, and you're still just kind of getting everything dialed in, I wouldn't stress too much on all of this yet, because your body hasn't even done all the initial adjusting that it's going to do, and it hasn't sorted itself out, so to speak. So before you get too crazy about all this stuff, and, obviously follow your intuition. And if you just know, hey, I think something's off and I probably just need an adjustment here or there that would make things click in better, then that's cool. But if you're balancing whether or not you need to stress on all this stuff, one way to decide is just straight up, how long have you been doing this? And if it's only 2 months or 3 months, maybe just give it a little bit more time to shake itself out before you get too crazy on anything.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, and there's nothing to say that you can't just be all in.
Right.
Like if you're one of those people, you're like, okay, I'm doing strict paleo zone CrossFit. You're like, wow, okay, you're going for it.
Yeah.
But you certainly don't need to do that. And then one of the problems that we run into with this stuff is that people tend to get burned out.
Yes.
So in the beginning, it's all fun. You're seeing all these amazing results and all this kind of stuff's going on. And then eventually you're just burned out of the whole thing. You don't want to talk about it. You don't want to hear about it. It's too much work. And that's not, so obviously that's not a sustainable model.
Right.
So that's why we're always kind of cautioning and urging people to take it slow, minimum effective dose, do the least possible amount of work to get the maximum benefit, because that's what people tend to be able to stick with.
Yeah. It's funny. I took this year-long internship that was kind of like a spiritual psychic school.
It was psychic school. It was a psychic trade school.
It was a psychic trade school.
The Arizona Institute of Technology, but for psychics.
Yeah, well, kind of. It was actually in the vein of the Berkeley Psychic Institute, but what it was really doing was working on your intuition and sort of getting more in touch with your own divine intelligence. But one of the things that the teachers would always say is, do you want to throw yourself into a growth period? And it meant that if you gave yourself too much too soon, that it would sort of turn your world upside down and it would be too much energetically for you to handle. So, you'd start seeing ghosts and hearing voices in the night. No, I'm kidding. But no, the idea behind it was that if you try to tackle a new thing too intensely right away, that it doesn't give yourself time from a physical or a metaphysical point of view to really adjust to those things that you're changing. And you can almost spin yourself out before you even get started because it's just too much intensity. So I think it's a really important point when you look at this sort of lifestyles. If you go too hard right out the gate, you might burn yourself out and you may not give yourself the correct adjustment period to really take in things slowly, digest them, understand them, and move forward at a sustainable rate.
Totally. That is exactly correct.
Yes. So with that said, I guess we'll talk a little bit, though, about macronutrient timing.
Yeah, because there's a few generalizations, right? So when we're talking about optimizing macronutrient timing, and to back it up even further, it's kind of like if you're going to eat protein, fat, and carbohydrate, how do you break that stuff up throughout the day? And, is it equal amounts in each meal? Is it a little bit of this here and then a lot of this wherever? And that can be so incredibly individual, but there's a few generalizations, like I said. So one of those generalizations is that we want to put the majority of our carbohydrate post-workout and in our evening meal. So that means that if you work out first thing in the morning, you would eat a little bit of carbohydrate and then a little bit of carbohydrate and some protein post-workout, then be low carb the rest of the day, and then eat the rest of your carbohydrate in your dinner meal. Now, this is when we're talking carbohydrate here, I'm talking about starchy carbs and fruit, right? So I kind of feel free to eat all of the non-starchy veggies that you want. Like there's really, I don't think you can overdo it on broccoli, from a carbohydrate perspective.
Right. Or
there may be
some,
broccoli and spinach and kale and that kind of stuff is, that's free fodder. So just have at it. I don't think anybody's going to, spike their blood sugar on broccoli.
Right.
So that's it. That's what we're talking about. So the starchy carbs and fruit. So if you're going to do some sort of sweet potatoes or rice or potatoes, and then the 1 or 2 pieces of fruit, we'd hopefully you're getting in per day. That's kind of what we're talking about there when we say carbohydrate, right?
And by all means, if you work out first thing in the morning, it doesn't mean you have to have some carbs going into it. I mean, if you can work out and get through your morning workout feeling fine, and, hopefully maybe you had a little bit of carbohydrate the night before that can help replenish those glycogen stores and get you sort of set for that next morning routine. It doesn't mean that you need to go have something to prep you for that workout. The only time you would need it is perhaps if you are trying to do your workouts in the morning and you're noticing you just don't have the gumption. It's just you don't have the energy. And first, you'd probably want to look at the night before, what you had the night before.
We were talking about post-workout carbohydrate and protein for breakfast. But I'm glad you brought it up though, because it's a good point, because it really does come down to what you did the night before is what preps you for that morning.
Right.
And the as far as like the pre-workout, post-workout stuff, I think especially if you're going to train in the morning, training fasted is just really a good idea.
Yeah,
if you can do it, I think it's a really good idea. And especially since most of us in here are not chasing some, crazy goal. Like my primary goal in life is 1,000-pound back squat. Like if that's the case, then you're going to eat whatever it is you need to eat in order to have those really heavy workouts be good workouts. Most of us aren't in that mode, right? So I think training fasted, if you can, is just definitely the way to go, and just not even get on the pre-workout like bandwagon. A little bit of coffee first thing in the morning, train, and then post-workout a little bit of protein or whatever you're going to have for breakfast.
And if you can, it's good to wait like 30 minutes after your workout so that you get that little bit of human growth hormone uptick after your workout as well. So and again, man, this is where this stuff starts to get so sticky, because if you're listening to what we're saying, we're talking about basically hacking everything from, your blood chemistry going into the workout to your hormones coming out of the workout. And it can get pretty deeply in the weeds trying to optimize all of those different things. But Yeah, although it can, but it's also pretty simple, because if you don't wake up starving and you don't wake up like, you feel depleted and you don't have enough energy or whatever. As long as you just wake up and you feel pretty good and you can go do your workout, just go do it. And then if you wait 30 minutes and eat, you're cool. You've done a bunch of really great things for yourself.
Yep. 30 to 60 is kind of the magic number, seems to be. And so then the same kind of thing applies if you train in the afternoon, right? So get up in the morning, and if you eat breakfast, cool. If you keep it low carb, and then if you don't eat breakfast, also cool. Lunch should be basically no starchy carbohydrate and a bunch of protein. So like a big ass salad kind of a thing, right? So load up a bowl with all of the non-starchy, dense, multicolored vegetables that you can stomach, and throw a chicken breast on there, right? And then work out in the afternoon, and then put any starchy kind of carbohydrate that you're going to eat in that post-workout meal. And that will set you up to, run all day long the next day, and kind of get you through that whole process. And the reason that we kind of keep bringing this carbohydrate stuff back in here is that there's, for some people, probably a lot of people, there's some really significant benefit to be had from reintroducing some carbohydrate back into your diet, especially if you've been doing this for quite a while. At some point, we know that being super low carb over the long term can actually, and will actually, increase insulin resistance to some degree. And just which may or may not be the worst thing in the world, but introducing a little bit of carbohydrate here and there to kind of keep you flexible, metabolically flexible in both directions is not a bad idea at all. And for some people, I think it could be a pretty significant boost in, the way they maintain lean muscle mass and perform and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, if you just kind of get into this habit, it seems to really jive with your body, and it seems that most people that sort of get into this routine with putting the majority of their carbs in their dinner meal, especially, they notice that, through most of the day, you can eat pretty light and lean and clean and feel really good. And then that evening meal gives you that satisfaction of the day. You're not going to bed hungry. You've got better sleep. It just seems to be a really easy flow for people to adjust to.
Yeah, and people who have food cravings or like sugar cravings and stuff often have them at night, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So why not, it's not that you're feeding into that, but why be miserable,
Yeah.
If you're going to do some carbohydrate, why not throw it in that dinner meal and kind of kill two birds with one stone,
Right. And obviously, if you add a little bit of carbohydrate into your dinner meal, you may not go hit the box of gluten-free cookies after. You may,
right.
Or the, half a bar to a bar of chocolate. You may end up feeling like, oh, actually, I just needed a sweet potato or a potato in my dinner, and now my sugar cravings are gone. It's amazing.
Right. Yeah. Body was looking for a little starch, and you got it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and obviously, with any of this stuff, everybody's life is different. Everybody's training's different. Lifestyle patterns, everything's a little bit different. But that's sort of a general overview of what we recommend. And the one thing we'll just point out is for folks who go paleo and they decide to have, paleo banana pancakes in the morning, well, that might not be the best way to set yourself up in terms of the way your body responds to that initial load of sugar in the morning. And yes, technically it's still paleo, but you're still not setting yourself up for the best success necessarily with introducing, a high amount of fruit sugar first thing in the morning.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, especially if your primary goal is fat loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially if you notice that you have a hard time with sugar cravings,
right? Yeah.
Then keep the carbohydrate out of the day as long as possible, because that's what sets you up for those sugar cravings the rest of the day.
Yeah. Get on that carb crash roller coaster, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. So the next thing, we had a question about poop, and in particular, loose stool. And this person said that they'd stopped using coconut oil in the coffee. And, for me, just right out the gate, anytime you're doing coconut oil, MCT oil, you're doing the bulletproof coffee thing, I mean, if you notice changes in your stool and you get loose stool or almost diarrhea, this is really, really common with the use of MCT, whether it's in the form of coconut or just straight MCT oil.
Yeah.
So this is not something that's unheard of. This is really common, and the best way to get rid of it is to stop the MCT oil usage.
Right. Or titrate it way back.
Way back, yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, some people do get used to it. Some people adjust to it, and they end up, you know, feeling really good, having those medium chain triglycerides in the morning. And, you know, obviously there's the whole bulletproof coffee thing. We did it for a while, and I've just landed after all of it, you know, coconut oil, coconut milk, MCT, butter. I've just landed back at doing a little heavy cream in the morning, and it just turns out that's what my body does best with. And, you know, if I do, my stomach never really adjusted to the MCT oil first thing in the morning, and I was always kind of fighting that battle too. And I just decided, you know, it's not that, this is not that miraculous for me.
You're right. It didn't, the cost benefit analysis wasn't there.
Yes.
Like bubble guts and a little bit of an extra buzz feeling or.
Exactly. And, you know, you can try switching it to coconut milk. I did that for a little while, and it turns out that too much coconut milk, too much almond milk, for sure, I start to have sort of an allergic reaction and almost like a little eczema patch on my right shoulder, randomly enough. So, yeah, out of everything, I've just landed at going back to a little bit of heavy cream, and I use clover cream, which seems to not bother me at all. Yeah,
and I think, you know, if you look at the deal with cream is like how much cream do you put in a coffee to get the kind of flavor that you're looking for? It's such a small amount. Like if you compare the total amount of fat product that you're putting in your coffee, like if you do a tablespoon of coconut oil and a tablespoon of butter and, you know, a tablespoon of MCT oil, that's a very different thing, you know,
than a tablespoon
of cream, you know. So just for that minimum effective dose perspective, if you're not in it for the medium chain triglycerides and you just want something in your coffee to maybe knock off the edge of the flavor or maybe even stave off hunger for a little while, cream is pretty innocuous, you know. I mean, especially if it doesn't bother you, obviously.
And, you know, things to look for in terms of dairy and whether or not it's having a ill effect on you is your skin. You know, if you have any breakouts, anything going on, then that's a good sign that maybe you're not tolerating dairy as well, or you're doing too much of it. And that, like I said, I'll have the same kind of thing. If I have too much dairy, too much almond milk, too much coconut milk, I'll have a little bit of like eczema almost. So it's a very small amount that I can do, but I seem fine with it as long as I just don't overdo it. So, you know, check it out. Yeah,
do the dang thing.
But if you've got loose
to circle
stool,
back,
Yep.
Well, and this really does come around to fat in general, right? So if you hit a threshold of how much fat you're throwing down, this will happen.
You're gonna knock
I
things
remember
loose.
In the paleo zone days when we were doing, you know, it was what was it? I'm 21 block zone 10x fat or whatever, right? It was like this was the thing. And so you're doing 10 times the fat of the normal thing. And the thought at that time was that it would support the level of exercise we were doing. Well, it's a lot of fat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A lot of fat. And at that time, it was coming mostly in the form of avocados and olive oil and stuff like that. And like, you just hit a point where your body's like, that's enough fat.
We've got to get rid of some of this, and there's only one way.
One way to go. Yeah, we're not sweating it out. You know, that's the bottom line. So
the butter sweats.
Yeah.
No, it's true. It's just quite simply just too much fat, and obviously the MCT is kind of a special brand of fat that can really start knocking things loose if you're not adjusted to it.
Yeah, it can cruise through pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So, and there's things that, I mean, if you're in the high fat camp and you really want to work on that and continue to work on that, anything you can do to increase stomach acid and digestive enzymes and stuff like that are going to help, right? Just kind of helps your body deal with that stuff, you know. And then some fibrous, you know, non-starchy veggies.
Yeah.
Butter and broccoli.
Butter and broccoli. You know, and just tinker with it. One of the things I would just ask myself is, why am I doing the coconut oil? Why am I doing the MCT? And am I noticing a dramatic benefit from it compared to, having diarrhea.
Having the trots.
Yeah. So, okay. So then the next thing that a few of you inquired about was belly fat, and that it seemed that belly fat was the last place for your body to shed fat, and it was, kind of the last fat store standing. So, this is a tricky one because there's a couple of different things that can be going on with belly fat. One is that just your particular body type happens to store more fat through the midsection. And, that could just be something where, everyone stores their fat a little bit differently. And that could just be your genetic predisposition that you store it through the waistline.
Right.
But the other thing is that obviously you're having a residual cortisol issue. So the first thing we're always going to ask people to look at is sleep and stress. And if you're falling short on either of those would be your obvious first fixes. And the problem with it is that you think, well, okay, I've been getting good sleep, or I've been, pretty low stress for 2 or 3 months. This should be going away. Well, you would think so, but this could take you 6 months to a year to really see significant changes.
Right. Yeah. And then all it takes, this is the battle that I fight with being a shift worker, right? Where you get totally sporadic stress and sleep interruption problems. Well, not stress interruption, spikes in stress and sleep interruption problems. And I can see it like my 6-pack, if I have a 6-pack, like dwindles literally overnight. If I'm busy at work for a couple of shifts where I'm stressed out, not getting a lot of sleep, it's almost immediate. Like that periumbilical fat, there's like a ring of fat around my belly button that just shows up. And everywhere else is still pretty lean. Got veins like poking out of the sides of my abs. Like this little donut fat pad right there in the front. And it is purely sleep and stress related. And the biosig, like the Polican method would kind of look at that and say, okay, yeah, this periumbilical fat is for the most part cortisol related. And then, the love handles are more insulin related and all of that kind of stuff. And there's probably some validity to that. Certainly in my experience, that's what's up. Like if you have, especially for men, if you're storing that belly fat, you're either drinking too much beer, which that's a no-brainer, or you've got this cortisol issue going on,
Yeah, and what?
Power.
Oh.
Power.
It's interesting because Katie Cordoza, our good friend, she was a trainer at NorCal Strength and Conditioning at Rob's Gym for, all of her college years, for 6 or 7 years, right? And once she stopped working there, she said because, she would have to get up really early for morning classes, and then maybe she would be coaching private sessions in midday. She was in college, so she's going to school. Then she's coaching again at night. She had a pretty high stress scenario going on with working pretty much full time, going to college full time, and, not getting a ton of sleep, having to stay up late to study. And she said that literally it took her 2 years to turn that around once she stopped with that schedule and was able to sleep in every morning and wake up without an alarm clock, do her regular workouts, eat regularly. It literally took 2 years to turn around before she saw her belly fat actually start to go away. Right.
And this is a pretty relatively high functioning athlete who's been eating paleo and training really smart for a long time.
For a long time, and has good insulin sensitivity overall and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's just the first thing that I really want to harp on, because you may think, well, I've been, paleo 3 months, or you may even have been paleo a year, but this stuff takes a while to turn around, and you have to look at how many years were you not this way, and how many years were you programming your DNA to express itself in a certain way, and how long have you now been trying to reverse the programming. So, just take a really solid look at how long you've actually put into play all of these things that can result in that change in real cellular molecular changes.
Yeah, and bear in mind, too, that this takes a while to dial in your own particular situation with, right? So you may be paleo for 6 years and doing it wrong the whole time.
Right.
Doing it wrong for you.
Yes.
You know, like, so you're like, man, I don't understand. I've been paleo for all this time and I'm not losing this fat. You're like, well, that's obviously not going to work for you to lose this fat.
Right.
Like, you're going to need to change something about it, you know, and that's where things start to get more, more specific, you know, with the timing and the kinds of training and the kind of, the priority of mindfulness and stress reduction over, you know, EMOMs and AMRAPs, you know?
Yeah. And also just, you know, simply starting to look at your macronutrient spread, you know, like high fat works really, really well for a while. And then at some point you may have to actually dial back the fat a little bit. There's the free feed paleo, just eating high fat and relatively low carb long term is not always going to get you down to maybe the body fat percentage that you're really looking for. At some point you may have to dial that in even more. And you may just actually have a body type. Like for me, I have to be really, really lean and I still carry a little bit of fat on my thighs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like that just may be your spot.
Totally. No, and that's a really good point, because like we talk about the belly all the time, but like Vanessa has a 6-pack when she's got buns.
Yes.
Buns on her buns.
I call it my love meat.
The love meat, yeah. You know, and me, I'm the exact opposite, right? So I'll have veins and muscles and muscle striation and stuff like that all over the place and still have a belly.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And that's just,
those are just our spots.
Yeah, dude, it's just what's up. And
yeah, and I'm just not that committed to dieting down all the time, to being, you know, really, really on some strict diet, because that's no fun, and I'm happy and fit and whatever. So, you know, it's one of those things that you also just have to look at, okay, is this just my spot? This is my trouble spot,
right?
My problem area. And, you know, just recognize that, to get it really, really much leaner than maybe what your body's happy with it being is going to take a lot of dedication and very specific dieting. And maybe that's important. Maybe it's not. Yeah.
Yeah. And if it is important, then it's something that we can certainly help people dial in. And
yes.
And I think what it usually comes back around to is going back through the program and taking a look at the, you know, decide who you are thing and see where you're fitting in the free feed, seat of the pants, or precision paleo stuff. And if you're, you know, if you can check all the boxes on free feed and check all the boxes on seat of the pants, and you've been doing it for a while and you're still not seeing what you want to see, then maybe it is time to dial it in, you know, and take a look at some other methods. One of the things that I think that happens a lot is once people start to realize the amount of the amount of effort, and I don't mean effort like physically, but the amount of effort that you have to put in to figuring out your situation. A lot of people just decide that they don't want to do it. Yeah. They're like, oh, okay, you know what? I thought it was going to be easier than that. Turns out I'm actually okay with what I'm doing.
Yeah, this is actually what happens.
Completely fine. Like this is exactly. I mean, because so what's the net effect of that? You know, all of a sudden you're happier with yourself.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that's freaking awesome. So now you just have gained a new perspective, and you've made a value judgment in your life that you're like, I'm cool.
Yes.
And that's amazing.
It is amazing.
That is probably one of the better outcomes you can have, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's super cool.
And that's a goal for us with Unveil Your Wellness, really, is that people really understand where they're at in their journey, and they can make educated decisions about, wow, do I want to suffer any more than I'm already suffering to get that next load of results? And to start to learn that, like, no, where you're at is a really healthy, beautiful place. It's sustainable. You have energy. You're in a good mood. Your skin is nice. Like, these are all really wonderful things.
Yeah.
And if you're, you know, 5 pounds heavier, 10 pounds heavier than you want to be, maybe that's not as big of a deal, because you're actually you look great and you're healthy.
Yeah, and you feel great. And that when you feel that way, it radiates. You know,
yes.
And it's like noticeable to everyone else.
Yeah, you become more beautiful.
Don't marry a rock star and have to cut weight for a music video.
I'm doing it too. Yeah. Well, yes.
But you know what?
Avoid that at all costs.
That's funny.
So, okay, last but not least, we had a question about the positioning in the squat and the correct position for your feet. So, the correct position would pretty much be feet straight ahead. So you want your feet a little bit wider than hips, so hip width apart, so you can sink down into that squat and you have room to get into the squat.
Right.
We see this happen a lot. A lot of folks have their legs too close together and it doesn't leave room physically for your hips to sink down.
Right.
So you end up squatting kind of in this weird position where you sort of go up on your toes in order to make room for yourself to go down.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like the difference between, like, if you think about the grok squat,
Yes.
so it's like the classic, sort of Asian squat, feet are together, completely, butt is on your ankles. Right. And there's that, which is not the position that we're talking about for squatting.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got to get some room,
Yeah, you've got to have some space there.
For the hips. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so feet straight forward, maybe, I think Kelly Starrett says somewhere between 10 to 15 degrees out is, he has still found that you can maintain the hip torque that we're looking for, like the hip stability you can look for with that sort of 10 to 15 degree toe out. So, like, don't stress on that too much. But I think what Vanessa was saying is spot on. I think where a lot of people ball this up is they're either too wide,
right,
where it starts to limit, like, their internal external rotation of their hips really starts to limit the movement,
right,
or they're so narrow that they put their body in a position that they have to have ridiculous ankle range,
right,
because you're squatting straight down, your knees are going straight forward,
yes,
because there's no room for your butt between your calves.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
Makes sense.
And if you think about it, what we're trying to create is the most stable position so we have good torque and we have good power output. So if it's about getting stronger, you want to think about what is the most stable line of my body, what plane can I move in to be the most stable and to create the most power. And it's always going to be where things are lined up, So if your feet are out too wide and you're trying to push against your feet to create power through the hip structure, that doesn't make sense, right? Your feet are so wide out. They're pushing up on at that point is the knee. Right. So you want to create the line as best as possible so that all the power translates from feet to knees to hips and upward. So it's all connected. So and the only reason we're harping on that is so that you can start to understand the idea of why we position the way we do.
Totally. And you'll feel it. Like, so one of the things I think that is good to tinker around with, like when you're playing with your foot position in the squat. So start, we're talking about feet straight ahead, feet are just outside of your hips, and sink down into a squat, whether you need to hold on to something or whatever to make it stable, because this is a point you're just kind of hunting out your tension and finding the way that this feels good. Sink down into a squat, trying to keep your shins as vertical as possible, and that's in every direction. So you want your shin to be plumb, straight up and down, front to back, and sink down into that squat. And keeping your shin vertical means you're going to have to kind of drive your knees out. Like, you're going to have to actively externally rotate at the hip. And what you'll find is that it creates tension to the point that you can almost sit in that squat based purely on the tension that's been created in your hip, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like your quads aren't smoking. You're just like, it's almost like you're sitting in a basket of muscle. And that is really what we're trying to achieve, because once you get into that sort of feeling where at the bottom of your squat, you're sitting down into this basket of muscle, then we start to take advantage of the stretch, shortening reflex and all that kind of stuff, where everything sinks down, you got all this peak tension, and then you contract and come back up into the top of the squat. And that's what we're shooting for, as opposed to this sort of segmented movement where you like passively fall into the bottom of a squat and then regroup and explode out of it, right? So we're looking for this, pulling the rubber band down towards the floor and then letting it go towards the ceiling, right?
It's connected movement, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and so at that point, the only reason that you would ever get into any other position in terms of a squat is like if you're in yoga and you're trying to work on ankle flexibility, or
Totally.
you're doing something that has more to do with mobility and range of motion, and can I get my body in these positions?
Right.
That's different, but you wouldn't want to be weighted in those positions. And those would be more just to look at flexibility and how to increase range of motion.
Totally. Yeah. Like the grok squat's a perfect example.
Yes.
If you're just going to sit around and, fish or
Yes.
poke a fire or whatever you're going to
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
that is the position to do it in,
Right.
and then it's actually it's a sign of really healthy hip function and all those kind of things. It's just not how you're going to back squat.
Right. And then I think the same person asked about lunges, reverse and forward lunging. So, same kind of idea, same kind of concept goes into lunging. So you're always trying to keep things in the same plane, and keeping the power output and the torque is the most important thing. And, shins vertical in your front leg.
Yeah.
You don't want your shin going out past your foot. You
Past
want
your toe. Yeah.
Yeah, past your toe. So, and then the one thing that you do need to think about with lunging, though, is that you do have a wide enough stance. So your hip width also needs to be basically, or your foot position also needs
Right.
to be basically hip width. You don't want to try to do it like you're doing it on a balance beam.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's a super common mistake that
Yes.
people make. They try to pretend like they're on a balance beam.
Right.
And it can be challenging because for some reason that's how your body just wants to move.
Right.
But what ends up happening a lot when you do that is that so let's say you step forward with your right foot into this lunge. Well, your hips come out of square. So your right hip ends up sort of in front of your left when you're in that super narrow stance like that, which is not necessarily a pattern that we're trying to develop. So it makes you feel really unstable, right?
Right.
And then plus your center of gravity is just narrower side to side. So, you're a little bit more tippy. But if you squat at just feet just outside of your hips, then you should lunge with your feet just outside of your hips.
Yeah.
At least it's a really good place to start. I end up a little bit narrower, but not much.
Right.
Like if you think about like training for the Olympic lifts, so like for the split jerk, that's like one of the most common problems is that people jump and land with their feet in line like they're trying to be on a balance beam. And it can be really tricky for your brain. Like I've had to just put like a piece of PVC pipe down so that you can look at where your feet are in relation, when you're standing before you squat to where you're standing in that split. And I think we actually talk about that a little bit in the in-step lunge demo, right?
Yes.
Like that width is a really important thing to try to maintain so that you can keep your hips square.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's room for you to do the movement. So, if you think about it, just like when you're in a regular squat, like you have to have room for your physical body to get down into the position.
Totally.
So, and this is one of the reasons we like reverse lunges is that it sets you, you're more apt to be set up in a better position when you step back into the position rather than stepping forward. A lot of times you'll step forward and you won't step far enough or you'll step too far, and it just is a little bit harder to get dialed in. Whereas if you start with that stable front foot and you step back, oftentimes the plane of where your first leg is in a really nice position.
Yeah, totally. And that like what Vanessa's saying with that, the front lunge or lunging forward, you also have sort of inertia,
Yes.
right? So you have this forward inertia, which it tends to kind of translate into knee way out over toe, right? Because most people, when they lunge forward, they put so much weight on the front foot, and really it is a balanced weight. So you step forward and then sink down. Right. As opposed to that kind of thing. So yeah, that is why we do the reverse lunge though. It's easier to kind of activate the things that we're trying to activate and without, putting your knee in a somewhat questionable thing. So this is what it always comes down to is everybody's like, well, you shouldn't squat below parallel because I thought that was bad for your knees. Well, and you shouldn't let your knee translate out past your toe in the lunge because that's bad for your knees. And what it comes down to is that, of course, it's not nearly that simple. And you can overpressurize your knee, meaning that you can have a completely closed knee joint and your entire body weight sitting on that knee like it would be in a pistol squat, right? And that's completely normal. It's half of a grok squat, right? Our bodies are perfectly capable of doing that. where it starts to get weird is if you then transition forward and extend the knee first, as opposed to extending your hip first. So you need to open that hip angle, right? So then this is where the sort of vertical shin idea comes in, is that we want that hip angle to open and then be followed by the knee, and then you don't have any problems whatsoever with these knee issues,
Right.
So it's, again, this stuff's difficult to just talk about.
It is, yeah.
It's hard to visualize, what it is that we're discussing, but the bottom line, vertical shin, you can't go wrong. Reverse lunges is very difficult to go wrong.
Yeah, and just always take a look at your knees. What are your knees doing? Because a lot of times you'll see your knees actually collapse in towards your towards the midline of your body. So whether you're in a regular squat or a lunge, you literally watch the knee and it'll start to just fall in towards the middle of your body. You always want to make sure that you're translating those knees out. And, when you're getting coached, that's probably the coaching cue you'll hear a million times is knees out, knees out, knees out. Because you're always trying to make sure that you're keeping that torque, keeping that stability by pushing the knees out slightly. Yeah. So, once again, it is hard to talk about, but hopefully you guys pick up a couple of things as we move forward each time, and totally. And we'll just keep on keeping on. Yeah. Keep talking about it.
And so something else to keep in mind with this stuff that can be really helpful is doing this barefoot. Because a lot of folks, I think most people in here are at least transitioning into some sort of a minimalist shoe, but even minimalist shoes, depending on how the soles are set up, can add a dramatic amount of instability to your ankle when you're doing this stuff. So you could feel really unstable, and some of it may be because of your shoe.
Yeah.
So ditch the shoes and do this stuff barefoot,
Then you can use your frog toes like I do. I spread out my toes and
which
grab.
is, but that's what's up. I mean, those things, that suspension system that is the arch of your foot, that's what it's there. I mean, that's what it's designed to do. So you look at that 3 points of contact in your foot being your heel, your big toe, and your pinky toe.
Yeah.
And those should be spread out and driven in and active, you know.
Absolutely.
That's the goal.
Yeah. So we'll keep diving into more of this as time goes on, but great questions, and congratulations on finishing your final week of the first month of summer. We've got some exciting stuff coming up next month, and, we'll be swapping in some new meditations this month as well. So hopefully, I know folks have been excited to get some new material on that. And, it's funny because when I sit down and write the meditations, I'm not really sure what's going to come or what's going to bubble to the surface. But for some reason, with this particular set of meditations, I was really focused on sort of a manifestation point of view and sort of, getting our minds and our vibrations to match up with who we are and who we are continuing to become. So there'll be a little bit of that energy in there. My mom's working on adding a couple of guided meditations in for us this month, so you guys will get to hear from her. And hopefully we just have an excellent next month of August. And if you have any questions about the schedule or any of that kind of stuff, feel free to hit us up in the feed. I'm sure if you have questions, others will have questions as well. So we're glad to address anything that you guys may be wondering about.
Yeah, and we'll make an announcement that kind of details it a little bit.
Cool.
So you can plan ahead.
Happy rest of your July. We'll see you in a week.
Bye, folks.
Bye.